Vintage Scuba, Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba. Hope you guys get a kick out of some of these things here. Now, I want to mention right now, by the way, that most, not all, but most of the stuff that I show on these Vintage Scuba videos that I've been showing you and sharing ideas on is also going to be for sale. Some I have sold. Almost all of it I will be selling. So if you spot something on here that you particularly, hey, I'd like to have that, then you simply send me an email or a comment right there on the playlist. I'll get back to you and we'll decide what we're going to do. Okay? Some items are special. I'm going to keep them. Now, I have a very, very good friend. His first name is Rob. Last name doesn't matter. That's his name. Rob doesn't matter. And great guy. We have so much fun together and all kinds of things. And every once in a while he says to me, I'll mention something. He says, Alec, single hose regulators aren't cool. Single hose regulator. Now, this is pretty funny because Rob is an excellent diver. And as a matter of fact, he dives with a double hose regulator 99.9% of the time. Occasionally, he has used a single hose regulator in a pool, but that's about it. He always dives with a double hose reg. He's used many vintage double hose regulators. Most of his diving is done on that fantastic new Kraken, that absolutely incredible, brand new, modern double hose regulator you can read about. Kraken, K-R-A-K-E-N, two-hose regulator. And so, needless to say, he's a fan of double hose regulators. So for him to say to me, oh, I like single hose regs aren't cool, natural. He's wrong. Single hose regs are really cool. If you've seen some of my videos about the Rose Pro regulators, they're cool. They're not double hose regs. You know, they're big bubbly hoses, and they don't have a lot of history. They're not Mike Nelson and Jacques Cousteau and all that kind of stuff. No, but single hose regs are pretty cool. And I have three here today that I want to share with you that I think are interesting. And I think, Rob, if you're watching, you'll find them interesting as well. Let's take a look. First of all, let's start over here with probably the most interesting. It happens to be the rarest of the three models. This is called the Northill Air-Mite. Now, Northill was a fairly well-known company in scuba equipment years and years ago. Northill made one of the very finest, one of the most beautiful double hose regulators, Rob. One of the finest, most beautiful double hose regulators many years ago, called the Northill, I think it was called the Air-Lung, wasn't it? Air-Lung, Northill. Anyway, beautiful reg. I have a couple, I've done a video on them, a Vintage Scuba video. You look back for it, Northill. And you'll see it beautiful, all cast bronze. Yeah. And the housing was held together with beautiful stainless steel nuts and bolts and lock washers. Beautiful, beautiful job, beautiful regulator, double hose. But they also produced, as time went on into the 60s, they also produced a single hose regulator because that is the way the market was going. And their single hose regulator is relatively rare. In fact, I'm going to say it's quite rare. Okay, because really they were into double hose regulators, so by the time single hose regs came along, Northill was, as a company, was not doing very well, and they produced this one model, as far as I know, just the one model, and shortly after this, they went out of business. But this is it. The first stage, as was very common back then, is a pretty common industrial style of regulator. It's just a plain, very simple diaphragm style yoke regulator. This is a regulator part here, which could have been used for natural gas, propane, any one of a dozen different gases commonly used in industry in all kinds of areas. And Northill itself was an industrial company. They didn't depend on scuba sales. Trust me, they would have gone out of business much earlier. But anyway, so perhaps this is one of their own regulators from some other application in industry. And they have attached to that a yoke for scuba purposes. You can see it's not a beautiful job of doing that. There's kind of a loose little fitting in there, and this goes on to a scuba tank. It has this special little thing sticking up, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then it has a hose, and the hose runs over to the second stage. And this is the Northill Air-Mite. The mouthpiece, you recognize it, pretty straightforward. It doesn't have a purge valve on this. You notice that, Kevin? No purge button on here. Pretty neat, though. Small and light in the Northill Air-Mite, in near perfect condition. And so it's a pretty interesting and fairly valuable style. I want to take just a moment longer with this regulator and show you a bit more about it. And this will come back to that special fitting on the first stage. This regulator, I'm going to take it apart. It comes apart quite easily. There's a threaded ring on the back. When you take that off, then the front face comes right off. Underneath the front face there is a diaphragm, pretty standard. If you look in any single hose regulator, that's pretty much the way they are built. Diaphragm cover comes off, diaphragm underneath. This is a pretty, looks like a normal diaphragm at first glance, but it's not. First of all, it has a very excellent brass insert here. It's riveted. There's brass plate on both sides, and this brass part down here, this part that pushes on the lever, is made of brass and is riveted together. Typical. I'm not surprised, because as I mentioned, the Northill company made wonderful, beautifully machined equipment, so it doesn't surprise me. On the diaphragm is mounted, right on the front is mounted the exhaust valve. I'm going to peel it up a little wee bit here. Maybe you can take a peek, Kevin, if I can get my thing. This is the exhaust valve mounted up on top. So the diaphragm down here and the exhaust valve up here. Can you see the difference there? And this is a relatively new concept. Not a lot, but a good number of brand spanking new, latest technology regulators use that same setup, where the diaphragm, the exhaust valve is mounted on the diaphragm. Okay, and it makes it very nice. What I also wanted to point out, though, is that this regulator, the second stage, is a little interesting. The little lever down in there, just a little knob on a lever, and you see how light it is. It's actually relatively easy breathing, and just a little lever. This particular regulator is a tilt valve. Now, they don't make tilt valves anymore. They don't make tilt valves for a good reason. Tilt valves are not particularly safe. A tilt valve, second stage, not made anymore, is an upstream. Now, if you've done any equipment training at all, you know what I mean. An upstream valve, which means that the air is coming this way, out of the hose into your mouth, and this valve, in order to open, in order to give you air, it must move that way, against the flow of the air. It must move upstream. Okay? Now, so what? Well, it takes a lot more force to move it upstream, first of all. And secondly, if the first stage in any way should malfunction and the pressure coming through from this hose increases, which is what happens when the first stage malfunctions normally, then the increased pressure coming from this hose will jam that shut. You get no air at all. With all modern single hose regulators, if the first stage malfunctions, as it usually, and the intermediate pressure in the hose increases, it actually blows past the second stage valve into your mouth. So if the first stage malfunctions in a modern regulator, you get extra air. Too much, actually, but you can live with that, right? You can live with too much air. You follow me? So with this older style of tilt valve, at the first stage malfunction, it cut the air supply off. That also explains what this extra little attachment on here is for. If, in fact, the first stage malfunctioned, if you follow this reasoning now, just be a moment here, and the intermediate pressure increases, so the pressure inside of this hose starts to increase, it jams the second stage shut. You have no air, but the pressure keeps building. These hoses are rated for about 200 to 250 psi, at which point they burst. Well, the company doesn't want the hose to burst. So what they do is they put onto the first stage a relief valve. So when the pressure gets up to about 200 psi, it releases that increased pressure. So air comes out of this and it saves the hose. Now you, the diver, of course you're out of air, so you're not saved. But the hose isn't going to burst. If that's any consolation, you can't get air, you're stuck down on the bottom, but your hose is okay. It's kind of a backward kind of a concept. But that's the way you tell the tilt valve. There's two ways to tell the tilt valve rather than just looking at it. The first stage will have some type of relief valve like that. And the second way you know what a tilt valve is, generally speaking, is you'll notice that the hose comes in at an angle, like that. Because the tilt valve has to come up in an angle so the tip of it will meet the diaphragm. So the hose comes in at an angle like that. Most second stages, the hose comes in at 90 degrees because there's a lever in there to work the valve. On a tilt valve, there's no lever. It comes up in an angle and the little lever sticks out. So there's two ways to tell one of those old-fashioned tilt valves. Anyway, there you go. The Northill Air-Mite. Neat little old regulator. Here's another one. Let's take a peek at this one now. You may recognize this scuba company. Can you see that, Kevin? Yeah, J.C.Higgins. I'm going to tell you something funny about J.C.Higgins. J.C.Higgins was like Simpson, Sears, and Eaton's many, many years ago. And I have an old catalog from the late 60s, early 70s. And you can go into that catalog and you can buy anything. Yeah, better than Amazon. better than Amazon. You can go on Amazon and buy anything, you say, right? Buy a pony on Amazon. Go ahead. I'm serious. You could go to the pet section of a Simpson, Sears, Eaton's, or a J.C.Higgins catalog in the right time frame, and you could order a pony. You could get it in black and white, or you could get it in brown and white, and it would be delivered by truck to your house, a pony. And dogs and cats and hamsters and snakes and all the usual pets as well, and all the supplies, saddles, bedding, and all that stuff. But you can't order a pony on Amazon. I don't think anyway. Can you order a pony on Amazon? Do they deliver by drone? Pretty neat, huh? Anyway, the point to all that is that J.C.Higgins didn't make scuba gear. They really didn't make anything. But what they did was a little bit like Walmart and Amazon. Amazon doesn't make anything. They just have many, many suppliers. Vendors or suppliers. They're called vendors today. They were called suppliers back then. And those suppliers gave J.C.Higgins equipment that they made. And J.C.Higgins put J.C.Higgins on it, right? Diving lung, you can see that. Why is it called the diving lung? Again, you should know this. Diving lung, because the word scuba had not been invented. This is not a scuba regulator, it's a diving lung. Anyway, so J.C.Higgins would buy this regulator from a company who made equipment, put J.C.Higgins on it and sell it. And they would try to make some other changes on it too. This particular one is all painted a pretty blue. The original regulator from Healthways wasn't painted blue, it was chrome. So Healthways would sell regulators to J.C.Higgins, who would paint them blue, put on a label, and it became a J.C.Higgins regulator. Quite rare. A couple of things more about it. First stage, just like my own first regulator. No ports, no holes, no gauges, no safe second, no BC inflate hoses. There's a funny little thing right here. What the heck is that? That's a pressure relief. Right, it's a pressure relief. Why is it a pressure relief? Because this is a tilt valve. Let's double check. Tilt valve. Does the hose come in at an angle? Let's go around this way. Does the hose come in at an angle? Tilt valve. I'm going to open this up. Give me a sec. Okay, so here we are, and we have the regulator taken apart. These regulators made by Healthways, marketed by J.C.Higgins, this one. Anyway, they have a ring you just squeeze it together with your fingers, and that ring comes out, and then the lid comes off. And this lid does have a purge valve. They were up to purge valves by this time. This is probably 6345, I'm guessing somewhere in there, okay? And then the diaphragm in there, pretty standard construction. Exhaust valve was down below. You can see it down there. And oh look, there's the tilt valve. Yeah, I was right, tilt valve. Pressure release on the first stage, and for the tilt valve itself, hose at a slope. Not necessarily a guarantee, but it's a really good indication that's a tilt valve. One more, that's it, we're done. This one's special. Now, this is a special regulator. Now, you've seen this before, this regulator, this one right here, you've seen this. I'm pretty sure you have. Because the picture of myself diving in Fendon Falls, Ontario in 1965, that photograph, if you look closely at it, you can see this regulator hanging on my chest. Yep, this is my regulator, my very first regulator I ever bought. I didn't tell very many people I had it. And the reason I didn't tell them is that my instructor, Al Hawking, wonderful man, gone now of course, at the YMCA in 1962, I think it was. And I was trained on 2-hose Mistral regulators. He was a big ex-Navy guy, big. Oh, tiny, it makes Kevin look like Tiny Tim. Al Hawking stood there and said, if you guys buy one of those single hose regulators, it'll kill you. You use a good old double hose. Rob, you would have loved them. Anyway, this is what came up. Good price, tank, regulator, wetsuit, knife, and some other junk for $75 in really, really good shape. And of course, it was quite new then. So I'm going to turn this around so you can actually see the name on it. And it's a kind of a neat name. They always made up fancy names for it. Look at this. Can you see the name on there? This is not a Bend-O-Matic. It's not like one of those computers that gave you the bends, not a Bend-O-Matic. This is the AquaMatic. It's a good name. Aqua, water, Matic. Every time you sucked on it, you got air. I guess that makes it Matic. AquaMatic. All plastic, side discharge. Yeah, the exhaust came out the side, mouthpiece. First stage, straightforward. No safety relief on this. This was not a tilt valve. See, the hose comes straight in. Not a tilt valve. Great old regulator. But there's something missing. First stage, you see it? First of all, it's very tiny, you know, very tiny. Hose comes out of this side, but you notice that there are no ports. There's no other nuts or holes or anything. No pressure gauge, hadn't been invented. No BCD inflator hose, hadn't been invented. No safe second. You know, we had octopuses, but we ate them. There are no safe seconds. And it's just as well we didn't have those things because you had no way to attach them. Well, that's sort of a silly statement because those technology develops simultaneously. When you get a pressure gauge, then you make a hole in the regulator to insert it. Not you, but the manufacturer does. But there you go. From the early 60s, U.S. Divers AquaMatic Regulator. My own first regulator. I think it's just as neat as the other ones anyway. Okay, there you go. 3 very neat single hose regulators. There you go, Rob. Single hose regulators are neat too. Hope you enjoyed that. I got lots more to show you. Take care, guys. Alec, Peirce, Vintage Scuba. See you soon.